Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm bringing you another faction guide for Cuba Libre. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Directorio. So you are a group that is trying for moderation in this country, and so your goal is to get your population, in other words, population in areas that you control on the map, plus your number of bases greater than the number 9. So basically, you want to get 10 or more on your scoreboard up here that is a combination of bases out and population controlled on this map. All the factions are going to have your own little set of operations that you can use to make this happen. Some of your operations have some crossover with other insurgent factions. Other ones are all your own, and definitely watch out because there are some special rules for you as we go. So your first operation that you can perform is called Rally. What does rallying do? Why would you do it? It lets you either grow your forces or hide your guerrillas. Where can you do it? You can do it in any province or city on the map that is either neutral or that has passive opposition or support. So this is where your ability to rally differs from both the Syndicate and from the 26th of July, because you are limited based on the support in the region where you're trying to rally. So you're going to have a vested interest in keeping places either neutral or passive in their feelings about either the government or the 26th of July, because if they have active opposition or active support, it impacts where you're able to rally troops. And then how much does it cost? Well, it only costs one resource per city or province that is selected for your rally. So the impact of your rallying action is impacted by whether or not there is a base in the space where you're doing it. So if there is no base, you can place one guerrilla. So I would be able to place one guerrilla here in Matanzas. There's passive opposition that's allowed. I could place one guerrilla here in Las Villas. It's neutral. That would be allowed. The other thing that I can do if there is no base is build a base. So in order to build a base, I would need 2 guerrillas. So let's say that I wanted to rally here in Camagüey, and then I want to rally again because I want a base. I would replace these 2 guerrillas with 1 Directorio base. If you're performing a rally action in an area that already has a base, so here we have a lovely base, then you can place guerrillas up to the population plus base in that area. So in this case, the population is 1. The base is 1. So boom, I could place 2 guerrillas here instead of just the 1 that I normally could. Alternatively, if these guerrillas were activated and I wanted to put them back underground, then in a space with a base, I can perform my rally operation to flip all these guerrillas to underground instead of adding more to the map. So that rally operation allows you to either put more guys out on the board, which you're really going to need to do desperately, especially as a Directorio, or you can build bases, which is also going to be crucial in order to get more people out and also to achieve your victory condition. Or the operation can be used to place guerrillas underground, which you might want to do in order to keep them safer and more useful. The next operation you can perform is called March, and you're going to do that because you might rally your guerrillas in one space but want to move them to another one. So where can they go? They can go to basically any spaces where there are already guerrillas adjacent. So there's a guerrilla here. I can move to an adjacent space with him as part of a march operation. And again, as usual with the insurgent factions, it only costs me 1 resource per city or province destination space that I pick, and it costs 0 to move into economic centers. So if I've got a smattering of guerrillas all over the place and I want to move them to a couple of different locations, I just have to pay 1 resource per destination space, and I can move more than 1 group. As I mentioned in the other faction videos, however, there are some limits to how we do guerrilla movement. One of the big ones is that no guerrilla can move more than once. So for example, I have a guerrilla here. I can't pay for this destination and then pay for this destination and be like, oh, well, he went here and then he went here. That's not a legal move. Guerrillas can only move 1 time per turn. So don't try to string them across the board like that because you can't. The other thing is that guerrillas move as a group if they have the same origin and destination spaces. And the reason that matters is because when you move guerrillas into a government-supported area that has cubes, then you're going to have to see if you're going to expose your guerrillas. So let's say that there's no police here. There's just 2 pieces here. And let's say that we've got 2 Directorio guerrillas in Camagüey that I want to move into Camagüey City. These have to move as a group, and the reason that it matters is that as they move into this space, they're moving to a space with support that has cubes. And when that happens, if the total piece count once guerrillas move in is bigger than 3, then you have to activate those guerrillas and they're no longer underground. So if they didn't have to move as a group, you could be like, oh, look, we're at the 3 limit. Oh, look, we went over 4. I can just activate this one and this one's still safe. No, they have to move as a group because now they're both going to move in. They're both going to push the piece count too high and they're both going to activate. So keep that in mind when you are doing a march operation. This is also true if you're moving into an economic center that has cubes in it. The presence of those cubes impacts what happens to your guerrillas if they go over a certain piece count. So marching is pretty straightforward. You're just moving adjacent and you have to pay for spots you move into. But your guerrillas might not stay underground if you're moving into spaces with a lot of government presence. Your next option is an action called Terror, because you in this game want your goals so badly that you are not above doing terrible things, including terrorism. So why would you terrorism? You do it to, in this case, bring an area closer to neutral, because that's what the Directorio wants. So terror markers also help to block future attempts to influence an area, and they can also influence resource collection by the government. So even though terrorism is a terrible thing, it's very useful to you in this game. And you can do terrorism in any space that has an underground guerrilla. So for example, here and here would be spaces where the Directorio can currently perform a terror operation. So how much does terrorism cost? It's 1 resource per province or city that you select. It's free to do it in an EC. And basically what you would do is you would activate 1 friendly underground guerrilla in your selected space where you're going to do terrorism. If it's a limited operation, you can only pick 1. If you're in a province or a city, you're going to place a terror marker, and you're going to move the support marker here 1 towards neutral. So in this case, we would go fully neutral in this area, which is what the Directorio wants. If we decided to do this in an economic center instead, we could reveal our guerrilla, and then we would, instead of placing a terror marker, we'd place a sabotage marker, and this is going to impact the government's ability to collect resources. One thing to note about these markers is that terror markers can stack. You can have more than 1 in 1 province. In an EC, there's only ever 1 sabotage marker. And the other thing that you should note is if somehow you manage to do so much terrorism and sabotage that you run out of markers, you don't place any more. So you got to stop somewhere with the terrorism. So that's terror. You use it to impact resource collection or to mess around with alignment in a city or province. And then your 4th option for an operation is to attack. Why do you attack? You attack to eliminate enemy forces and hopefully get closer to controlling areas on the map, especially because you want control, because you want population, because it's directly tied to your victory condition. So where can I attack? I can attack in any space on the board that has a guerrilla and any enemy. So right now the only eligible spot is here because I have my own guerrillas and there are some enemy pieces here. How much does it cost? It costs 1 resource per space selected. So if I had more options, I could attack in multiple locations. If you have a limited operation, or in this case, you're limited by your positioning, you can only do 1. It would just cost you 1 resource. Then in each selected space you're going to do that, you activate all of your guerrillas. This is perhaps a very stupid attack right here. And then you're going to roll a d6. So if your d6 roll is less than or equal to the number of guerrillas, you remove 2 enemy pieces here. So let's roll. I got a 4. Nothing would happen. I would have totally failed. But let's say that something magical happens and I roll a 2. 2 is equal to or less than 2, which is the number of guerrillas I have here. I can remove 2 enemy pieces of my choice. The only one I can't remove is the syndicate. And I can't remove it partially because you can't actually remove syndicate casinos. You can only close them. And I also can't close it until all these other cubes are gone because the government will in fact protect the syndicate. So just remember that bases are almost always the last thing that you can mess with. And you have to get through all the other pieces first. And do note that while typically factions don't protect each other, if they're government pieces, they will actually protect organized crime in the area. So you can only go after government pieces in this spot. So that was a very stupid attack, but you could do it if you wanted to. The die roll aspect probably will let you know that you want to make sure there are a good number of guerrillas in an area before you decide to roll for an attack. One thing that's interesting too, by the way, is that the faction that's executing the attack can generally choose the pieces. They can do 2 pieces from different factions, and they can also remove underground guerrillas. So you have a pretty wide range of what you can do if you have a successful attack operation. The other thing to note is that if you roll a 1, that's good because it means that you can carry out the attack, but you can also place 1 gorilla. So if you roll a 1, it lets you put an extra person out there on the map. Fantastic. And the other thing to note is that you are allowed to take any cash removed and you put it with a gorilla piece from your faction. So if I decided as the syndicate to do a profit and one of these little government cubes is holding my cash, oops, if I performed a successful attack here, then suddenly the Directorio owns my cash. And that is pretty juicy. There are full cash rules in the syndicate video, and they're pretty nice. All right, so now it's time to talk special activities. So the Directorio has its own 3 special activities. That's a lot of specials. But the first one is called Subvert. Why would you subvert? You do this to either earn resources or to neutralize support or opposition in an area. Where can you do it? You can do it in a Directorio-controlled province. So the only great location for subvert right now would be Camagüey. It's under Directorio control, and it's got passive opposition. And I might want to make that fully neutral. It is limited by what operation you do, so it only accompanies rally or march. So you have to have collected some guerrillas or moved them as your operation in order to subvert. And what subvert lets you do is you get as many resources as the population of the province. So here I'd get 1 resource, and I would set support to neutral. So in areas where you have control, especially these higher population areas, you can collect stuff and you can keep the people's support or opposition in the range that you like, which is neutral. So the next special activity you can perform as a Directorio is called Ambush. Why would you do it? Because, as you might have noticed, when you are trying to do a normal attack, you have to roll a die to see how you do. Ambush guarantees you at least some success in 1 space, and therefore it is awesome because sometimes the dice just won't give you that. So that is why you would do an ambush. Where can you do it? You can do it in any one unresolved attack space where there is an underground guerrilla in your faction. So for example, if we were attacking here, we have an underground guerrilla that hasn't been resolved yet if we've declared an attack here, and we can do an ambush. So as you might have noticed, this is a limited special activity. You can only do it in a space where you have declared an attack operation, but you haven't resolved it yet. So if you want to do an operation with special activity and you can attack, the attack ambush pairing is really nice. Basically, instead of a normal attack procedure, when you ambush, you activate one of your underground guerrillas, you remove 2 pieces of other factions, and then you also place 1 underground guerrilla from your available forces into the space. So an ambush lets you get a free successful attack and then place another guerrilla as long as you have chosen an attack operation that turn and you have the guerrillas in place to handle it. So use ambushes often, use them well. And then the last special activity that you can do as the Directorio is called Assassinate. Why would you do it? Well, you do it because you want to eliminate an enemy unit. And a lot of times you might want to eliminate something that's protected, like a base. And an assassination is going to let you do it. There are some limits to where that can happen. So you can only do it in spaces where there are more Directorio guerrillas than there are police, specifically police. And it has to be a space that's just been or will be selected for terror. So you can't just do it with any old operation. This is like the one thing that you get to do with a terrorist attack. So you can choose a terror operation and then you can pair that with an assassination in one of the spaces where you committed that kind of attack. So what do you do with that? You can either remove or close, in the case of the syndicate, any one enemy piece in that space. So that means that you can choose to target a base and not just a troop or a police officer or another guerrilla. The other thing you get to do is place any cash removed with a Directorio guerrilla in that space. So if you want to assassinate the person who has the cash and take their money, you can do that. And I highly recommend it. It'll tick off the other player, but you're not here to make friends. You're here to win. So as a Directorio, you're going to want to rally, which means putting friendly units on the board. You're going to want to march, which means you're moving your guerrillas around to adjacent spaces. You can form terror, which is going to affect the support levels of the area that you're in. And you're going to want to attack because you're fighting. You're going to need to eliminate enemy forces, especially if you want to take control of areas and get their population to count towards your score. Then paired with those things, you can subvert. So that means that you can gather resources from an area and then set the support or opposition meter to 0. You can ambush. So in a space where you're going to attack, you can use one of your underground guerrillas to carry out some automatic successes before you roll. And you can also assassinate. So when you've committed terrorism somewhere, you have the option to remove an enemy piece in that space as well, and it can really be any piece. So if we do terrorism here, and we also want to pair it with an assassinate special action, we can actually assassinate the base straight up. And if you kill a piece that has cash, then you can take the money. And those are your options as the Directorio. Hopefully this will give you a good sense of how they play and what your options are when you're trying to reach your goal or just mess with somebody else on the board. So that'll bring this video to a conclusion. Hopefully you enjoyed it. You're going to feel more comfortable playing the Directorio faction. And if you're playing somebody else, hopefully this was informative and you can go look at what your own faction can do and then decide how you want to throw a wrench in the Directorio's works. So thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and I'll be back with another video soon. Happy gaming, everybody.